Mishnah.
Let's see.
Yeah. Test Bavman Allah, 15a. We're going to go with the Rambam's interpretation, which I think is the mainstream interpretation of the Mishnah. Tosfos has a different interpretation of the Mishnah, but we're going to go with the Rashi or Mefarish over here also has a slightly different interpretation, a part of the Mishnah, but we'll go with the Rambam. Hareni Nazir, person says, I'm a Nazir. When my son is born, Benazir Me'er Yom, and I'm a Nazir for 100 days. So as we learned from previous Mishnayos, if he wants, he could start his Nazirus of 100 days right now. He doesn't know when his son is going to be born. Nolad lo bein ad shivim. So if his son is born up until 70 days in the count, lo hifsid klum. He hasn't lost anything in his account. What does it mean he hasn't lost anything? That he would only have to do a total of 100 days? That's how Tosfos learns. With the way the Rambam and most we showed him learn is that no, it means that the 70 days are good towards his 100-day count for his Nazirus. Then he takes a break. He counts 30 days for the Nazirus of his based on his son being born. Then he brings the Korbanos, cuts his hair, and then he sits another 30 days to complete his 100-day Nazirus. So altogether, he sat for 130 days, but at least it doesn't have to continue more than 130 days. La'achar shivim soser. It's not clear whether the next word shivim should be there or not. The way the Rambam is Gores, he seems to hold ad shivim. So let's say that 80 days into his Nazirus, that's when his son is born. Mm-hmm. So then he has to sit 30 days of Nazirus because his son was born. But then in order to complete his Nazirus, since he already cut his hair, he needs for the hair to grow for another 30 days. So it turns out even though he sat 80, he's going to have to sit another 30 for 110. So the extra 10 days that he sat after 70 days, all of that gets canceled. All of that has to be redone. There's some sort of an explanation that Rashi suggests that maybe he loses the entire count, but that's not the way that we assume. Because the cutting of hair can't take place until the hair is grown for 30 days. That's why he'll have to sit for another 30 days. If he already had the Nazirus for more than 70 days before the son was born, so whatever was above 70 days, he's going to have to redo. That's the Mishnah, that's the Halach. Now, the Gemara says, Amar Rav. Rav is going to say something that we don't hold like. Rav says, Yom Shivim, the 70th day itself, let's say the son is born on day 70, so he can count it both for the 70th day of his personal Nazirus and the first day of the Nazirus for his son. Thank you very much. Yom Shivim Ole Lakan or Lakan.
Right. He pledged to do 100 days.
He pledged to do 100 days, so he has to do 100 days plus 30 days for the Nazirus that he pledged for when his son would be born. So his son is born after 70 days. He does 70 days. Let's say he counted 70 days of his Nazirus. So now he takes a break and he counts 30 days towards the Nazirus for his son being born. And then he completes the rest of the 30-day unit for his own Nazirus for a total of 130 days. So Amar Rav Yom Shivim Ola Lakan Lakan. Rav says the 70th day, let's say that on the 70th day his son is born. So the beginning of the day counts, we say Mixas Yom Kulo, counts towards his Nazirus, and then he can start counting the 30 days starting that day on day 70. So we'll finish on day 99, and then he'll bring his Korbanos on day 100. The day after he brings his Korbanos on day 100, he'll start counting the remaining 30 days. He'll be done with that remaining 30-day count on day 129, according to Rav. Amar Rav Yom Shivim Ola Lakan Lakan. So tonight the Mishnah said, Nolad lo ad shivim lo hifsi klum. That if he up until 70 days, if the son is born, let's say on day 70, he hasn't lost anything. What do you mean he hasn't lost anything? According to his count, he would have had to be a Nazir for 130 days. Now, according to Rav, he gets to be a Nazir for only 129 days. He's going to gain a day, according to Rav. You're right, that the Mishnah really is misleading in that way. So lo litni ad shivim. It didn't have to say that up until 70, he's not going to lose anything, because really up until 71 days, he's not going to lose anything, because the 71st day, he can already start counting the 30-day period of the Nazirus for his son, and then he brings the Korbanos on day 101, and then he can start counting 30 days the remaining 30 days of his own Nazirus, then he'd finish on day 130. So really up until 71 days, he'd be okay according to Rav. Mishum diktani sepa acha shivim soser. So therefore shivim katani. So since it says in the sepa that after 70 days, then he's going to have to redo days. So that is true after 70 days. So therefore, the ratio that says he doesn't lose anything up until 70 also says 70 days. Katani ratio shivim. Since it says mishum diktani sepa acha shivim soser shivim or ad shivim, katani ratio shivim as well. So Tashma Misepa. So wait a second. Let's then try to derive from the Sepa whether the statement of Rab makes any sense. The Sepa said, "No Lord Acha Shivim Soser." That if Soser Ad Shivim, that if the son is born after the 70th day, meaning let's say he's born on day 71, so then he loses days. But wait a second. According to Rab, he doesn't lose any days unless the son is born on day 72. So we say, yeah, that's what it means. It means after 70 means after. My achar, achar. Okay. Where else in the Gemara do you have the word achar 3 times in a row? So my achar means achar. It means way after. It means that past the 70th day, past the 71st day, way past the 70th day. If the son is born the 72nd day, then he'll lose something. About achar mamish, but if it's the 71st day, then hakinami delosas. According to Rabbi, he hasn't lost anything, because he can count the 30 days starting day 71, finishes his count on day 100, brings the korbanos day 101. Say mitzvah yom kikulo, he can start counting the last set of 30 days starting day 101, he'll finish at day 130. So hihachi my area the tani nolad ad shivim lo ifsid klum. So then, if that's the case, so why does it say nolad ad shivim lo ifsid klum? That if he's born up until 70 lo ifsid klum, afilu acha shivim nami ha'amis lo sasam. Even if it's after 70 days, you say that he's not going to lose anything. Ella shma mina. Rather, we see from here the fact that we don't have sort of like an extra day, which is built into the Mishnah. The Mishnah seems to be very particular, both in the ratio and the Sefer, regarding 70 days. Shma mina acha mamish. That acha really does mean right after 70 days, he's going to lose something. If he's going to lose something right after 70 days, that means that we don't say mitzvah sayom kukulo, v'chein masnisin l'rav, and so too we see that the Mishnah l'rav presents a kasha. It's a strange lashon. V'chein masnisin l'rav means v'chein masnisin l'rav. It's a kasha. If you look at Rashi, v'chein is a kasha masnisin l'rav. Shma mina, that we see that the Mishnah does not support Rav. If anything, the Mishnah provides a rebuttal or a contradiction to the opinion of Rav. Okay. The last day one will be the first one of the next one. That's the way that the Rav's principle says ola lakan o lakan.
This issue, I'm saying outside of this,
if a person stam has 2 nazirios, so then it would follow according to Rav that the last day of the first one should be the first day of the second one, unless I say, but if a person, let's say 2 people have nazirios, that Reuven and Shimon, and Shimon says, I'm going to start my nazirios after Reuven finishes his, so then he presumably would only start after Reuven's nazirios comes to an end. Right.
But is that because it's 2 Naziros and here he's in between? The first one is not a full Nazir.
The way in which we would view it is like this. If you don't hold like Rav, so the explanation is that when he sits, when he observes Naziris for himself, and then he observes Naziris for when his son is going to be born. So the way in which it's treated is basically as if it was Reuven doing one Naziris and Shimon doing the other Naziris. As because one is for himself and one is for his son, so therefore that's why it doesn't. That's why it doesn't count. That's what the Rishonim explain.
You can't overlap.
You can have in this case you can have in our Mishnah, since we hold against Rav, we hold that they would not be allowed to overlap. They would have to be separate. That's correct, because they're separate for separate people. One Naziris is for himself, and one Naziris is for his son. Let me just drink some coffee.
the person actually completes his material. In the morning, he does all his requirements, the funds, whatever. In the afternoon, he decides to start a new one. Holy part, he decides to go, he do his Naziris and things like that.
So he would have to, if it's the type of Nazirus where he has to actually bring korbanos, so then he'd have to wait until the day that he brought the korbanos, and then he would have to start the second Nazirus on that day. In other words, the Mixas Yom Kikulo of Rab works, if he doesn't have to bring korbanos, then just the 30th day that he counts can be the first day, the 70th day that he counts for himself can be the first day of the counting of the 30 days for his son. If he does have to bring korbanos, then he has to wait until the day that he brings korbanos. That's what the Pirush Harash says over here. And he has to wait until the day that he brings korbanos in order to begin the next count. So when he finishes the Nazivus, let's say of 30 days for his son, so then he's up to day 99 at that point, according to Rab, right? So then he brings korbanos the next day on day 100, and that's when he would begin the last set of 30 days of his own personal Nazirus, according to Rab. But he wouldn't be able to begin prior to actually bringing the korbanos of the previous Nazirus. Okay, so that's why he would start on day 100. But he still gains because he finishes the count on day 129 as opposed to 130. That's why we say the Skuri Yisker, according to Rab. But we don't know like Rab. But Rab, Kamana Malishmaite, Rab, who seems to be rejected by our Mishnah, who is Rab holding like? Who is Rab holding like? So Kiman Amar L'Shmaite, that mixes Yom Kikulo, Ilay Mikabashol. So you'll say that maybe he's going like the opinion of Abashol. Abasholos mixes Yom Kikulo in the context of Avelus. Ilay Mikabashol, the Tanana Kovis Mesa Shlosh Yom Kodem L'Regel. Person buries his dead 3 days before the Regel. 3 days before there's a Yontif, he starts his Avelus. The main 3 days of Avelus are the first 3 days. So Batla Mimenu Gzeira Seshiva, those are the days of crying, those are the first day, Gimel Yom and the Bechi, right? So if he sat the full 3 days, well, let's say that's even on the, he sat 3 days, so that's good enough. So when the Regel comes, it will cancel out the rest of the Shiva. Shmona Yom and Kodem the Regel, if he already sat 8 days before the Regel, so he completed his Shiva, and then because he already began 1 day of Shloshim, Batla Mimenu Gzeira Shloshim, so then the Shloshim is canceled out. And if he's not sitting, and if he's not in a Avelus for parents, but he only has an Avelus of Shloshim, so the Shloshim is over and he'd already be allowed to take a haircut and shave on the Erev Regel in the afternoon. And if he didn't take advantage of this, since this is a cancellation of the Shloshim, according to the Tanakama here, is only because of Kavod Regel, so then we're not going to say that the Regel will cancel, then he'll have to continue observing the Shloshim after the Regel. Also, Regel, give him a patch because he didn't take advantage of the Kavod Regel. Turning the page, Tesvav, I'm in base, Jack, if you want to look at the page. Abba Shol Omer, Afilu Lo Siper Kodem Regel. Abba Shol says, no. Once the Regel cancels, the Avelus cancels it, whether he takes advantage of the cancellation or not. We're not giving him a patch. Because we say Mixas Yom Kikulo. Even if he didn't get a haircut before the Regel, once the Regel is over, the Shloshim is still over, and he'd be allowed to take a haircut. Because Shek Hashem, the main part of Abba Shol's statement is going to be what he says right now. We have to listen closely. Tanakama spoke about 8 days, but Abba Shol is going to throw in 7 days. Shek Hashem, Shemitzah, Shloshim, and Ratel is the Gezerah Shiva. Just like if you sat 3 days, and so then the Shiva would be canceled. Tosfos on Tesvav and Aleph points out that the Gemara Moed Katan doesn't pass in that way. Moed Katan says that even if you sat for a tiny little bit of time, meal of Lav Hilchasachi, Moed Katan Hakim Maskina Pilu Sha'achas Kodem L'Regel Batlam Gzeira Shiva. Even if a person only sat Shiva for an hour, a couple of minutes, they took off their shoes right after the mace was buried before the Regel, that would also cancel the Shiva. He says just like the 3 days, the way we pass can even a tiny, even a couple of minutes of observance would cancel out the Shiva. So too, Kak Mitzvah Shiva. So too, if a person already had 7 days of their Avelus, not 8 days, 7 days before the Regel, it would cancel the Shloshim. Why does it cancel the Shloshim? Because the morning of the 7th day is the end of the Shiva. The rest of the 7th day already counts towards the Shloshim, is already considered like the 8th day, even though it's only the 7th day. And therefore, that would already cancel the Shloshim. That's the way we paskin. So my time at the Abba Shol, what's the reason for Abba Shol? The 7th day is Ola Lakan Lakan. The 7th day counts as the last day of Shiva and the first day of Shloshim. So Dilma, we say, you're right. You're right. Abba Shaul clearly is consistent with Rab, but he's not really a source for Rab. Why is that? Because Dilma Adkan Lokama Abba Shaul Bebel Zayin Rabbanan. Maybe Abba Shaul only says his opinion with respect to Shiva, which is a din Rabbanan to keep 7 days of Avelus. Rashi or the Mefarish over here says that the Ikar Avelus, meaning the Avelus Taraisa, is only the first day. The Rif and the Rambam are of the opinion that even the first day of Avelus is only Daraisa when it's both the day of death and the day of burial. But the Rosh quotes Rabbeinu Tam, and this is the way that we generally assume that even the first day is only the Rabbanan. So what then is considered to be Daraisa? The only thing that's considered to be Daraisa is Aninus. And even Aninus is only Daraisa insofar as an Onen, a person who lost a close relative who hasn't been buried yet, is not allowed to eat kachim and he's not allowed to eat ma'aser sheni. Only that is a din daraisa, but everything else, including all 7 days of Avelus, are a din darabanan. About benazir daraisa lo. But when it comes to nazir daraisa, we don't have a precedent that for a din daraisa you could say ola lakan based on mixas yom kulo. El Rav Demak Rabbi Yossi. It must be the Rav is basing himself on Rabbi Yossi, who says his din even with respect to daraisa when it comes to tumah v'tara. The Tanya Brisa says Rabbi Yossi Yom Shemeres Yom Keneged Yom. You have a woman, she's not in her 7 days that she would be a nida. She's in her 11 days in between. Every woman has cycles according to the Gemara of 18 days. 7 days she'd be a nida, then she has 11 clean days typically. But if she sees 3 days, she sees blood 3 days in a row during that 11-day period, she becomes a zava and she requires zayin akiyim. Nowadays, we treat all of our women as zavos. Whenever they have any riyasdam and they need 7 days, 7 clean days. Anita, technically speaking, didn't even need 7 clean days. She could see blood all 7 days and then go to the mikvah and she's fine. If she be a zava and she saw blood 3 days in a row, so then she becomes a zava and she has to wait 7 and zayin akim and she has to bring a korban. So a woman then, if she saw blood one day, let's say on day number 8, she saw blood, she doesn't know whether she's going to be a zava or not. So she has to wait the next day. If the next day she is a clean day, so then she doesn't have to bring a korban. She does become a zava. So that's called the next day. She's a shomeres yom keneged yom. The Tanya Rabbi Yossi Yom shomeres yom keneged yom. Let's say that it was on the 13th day of Nisan, she saw blood. And on the 14th day, this might be her clean day. And they bring a korban. They bring the korban Pesach. They have her in mind. She shachtu v'zarko aleh b'sheni shalab. And then Erev Pesach, they bring the korban Pesach in the early afternoon, and then 5 p.m., shortly before Pesach, she sees another Riyaz Dam. She sees blood. So now it turns out that she's still in the course of her days where she's still Tameya, and if she sees again the next day, she'll be a Zava. They say because of the fact she's Tameya, she's not allowed to eat from the Korban Pesach. But she doesn't have to bring a Pesach Sheni, two Milasos Pesach Sheni. So why is it she doesn't have to bring a Pesach Sheni? My time into Rabbi Yossi, that's what Rabbi Yossi says. So what's the reason for Rabbi Yossi? The reason is because she already counted part of the day as a clean day, that the big day began and she did not see blood. So therefore she became Tahora. So that's Mitzvah Sayom Kekulo. So my time into Rabbi Yossi, it must be that his reason is, it must be because the lab Mishum the Kasavar, Mitzvah Sayom Kekulo. He must be because he holds Mitzvah Sayom Kekulo. We're going to go with the Girsa of the Vilna Gaon, because otherwise the Gemara becomes hopelessly complicated. I would venture to say even impossible. As there is, Rabbi Yossi clearly holds the Mitzvah Sayom Kekulo, and therefore, when she sees blood later in the day, it's only Mikanam Ulahabo Mitame. It's only that she became the Tameya anew, but it's not a continuation of her previous tumah. So when the Korban Pesach was offered for her, she was an Isha Tahora, and now she's going to begin a new count. This is her first day. We'll see whether it goes to 3 days, but it's not a continuation of the tumah that began yesterday. Umisava Rabbi Yossi Hachi. Is it true that Rabbi Yossi holds that way? Tanya, but there's a brisa that indicates otherwise. Rabbi Yossi Omer Zabal Shtei Riyos. If you have a man who has an emission, some sort of a pasa that comes out of him, makes him into a zab, some sort of gonorrhea that comes out of oso makom. So if he sees 2 times, so then he has to count 7 days. If he sees 3 times, he even brings a korban. So Sheshachtu, so now he only saw 2 times, and he's not a Zav that's going to be, that's going to, that has a full-fledged, that has a full-fledged Tuma Ziva, which is only if it's 7 days. I mean, if he sees 2 days, he doesn't have to bring a korban. If he sees 2 times, he doesn't have to bring a korban. If he sees 3 times, then he has to bring a korban. If he sees 2 times, he counts 7 days, and he doesn't bring a korban. So here we're talking about a zav who's not yet obligated to bring a korban. If he wouldn't, he's on the 7th day of his counting. If he would be obligated to bring a korban, so then we couldn't shech the korban pesach for him until he brings the korban. So we're talking about either a zav al shtei riyos sheshachtu mizarko la b'shvi shalom, or v'chein shemeres yom keneged yom, or we have a woman who saw blood during, let's say, day 8, and now she's counting on day 9, and she saw days 8 and 9, and now we're looking to see whether she's going to see blood on day 10. But in the meantime, as she is not a full-fledged zava, would have to bring a korban. Sheshachtu v'zarko aleha, and they brought a korban pesach either for her or for the zav. And then afterwards, they either the zav or the shomeres yom keneged yom saw blood. Even though whatever items of sitting, like a chair, or lying on like a bed that they sat on that day, even if there were surfaces of like mattresses that intervened between them and that lower couch or bed or chair, that lower couch or chair is going to become tamei b'mishkav u'moshav, which means that if anybody else touches it or carries it afterwards, that they're going to become a rishon l'tumah, and that's even the mafreya. It's anything that they sat on that day is going to have tumas mishkav u'moshav, despite the fact that when the day began, they were not having emissions, or the woman was not seeing blood. So there is retroactive tumah we see. So how can you say it's only mikana labah? However, they're p'turim milasas pesach sheni. They don't have to bring the pesach sheni. We don't say that there was something wrong with this korban pesach that was born on their behalf. No, that was still good. They were yotzei with that korban pesach. They just don't, and they don't have to bring a pesach sheni. So says, but the kasha is here. We see that according to Rabbi Yossi, even the shemeres yom keneged yom becomes tamei midrabanan. So how can you say that he's of the opinion mixas yom kukulom on a deraisa 11 is only mikana labo mitame? So we say nah. Ma'ila mafreya. What does it mean that there's retroactive tumah? That's only midrabanan. Obviously, when we're mitame the mishkav u'moshav retroactively that day, that's only a chumrah midrabanan. Hakinami mistaba. That makes sense. Disakadaitek midaraisa. If it would really be tumah midaraisa, so why would they be parta from bringing a pesach sheni? Am I tumah milasas pesach sheni? So we say no. You could still argue that the tumah is a tumah deraisa, and we see that Rabbi Yossi does not hold mikana laba. The olam emalach tumah deraisa, and we're talking about a type of tumah deraisa which is tahom. That the person passed over, for example, ground in which there was a dead body buried way underneath. That's called tumah of the deep. And if they discover afterwards that when the korban pesach was brought, that they were really tamei, so there's even though they really are tamei midaraisa, tahom deziva hitivu. There's a special halakha l'moshe misinai that if it was tumas tahom, that they're exempt from bringing a pesach sheni. But really, the tumah does go the mafreya. So therefore, we don't have a proof. However, Ba'af Rabbi Yoshia. This is Ba'af is a strange word over here based on how we're learning the Gemara, but we'll go with it. Ba'af Rabbi Yoshia, Sabalam Mafreya Midrabanan. Even though we slugged up the raya a little bit, we brought what seemed to be a raya, at least from the case from the first price that we had brought, that according to Rabbi Yossi, we don't impose retroactive tumah that's only mikana laba humitame. Rabbi Yoshi is also of the opinion that according to Rabbi Yossi, it's only mikana lehabah that the person would become a tamei, and therefore that we see that he subscribes even on a deraisa level to the principle of mixas yom kukula. Rabbi Yoshi is seven mafreya midrabanan. That when Rabbi Yossi says that the person's tamei and mishkav u'moshav, it really only means midrabanan and not this tumas tahom answer. The Tanya, because we have a brisa that says as much. Rabbi Yoshia Omer. Rabbi Yoshia Omer is of the opinion. We changed the Omer to Omer, interestingly enough, right? Because all of our Chachmei, Gemara is still alive and well as far as we're concerned. So the Bach changes Omer to Omer. Rabbi Yoshia Omer, Rabbi Yoshia says, Zav aroeh b'shvi shalom. If you have a Zav who sees an emission, he has a nocturnal type of emission, b'shvi shalo, or this gonorrhea type of emission. So he was supposed to count 7 clean days, but if he sees even on the 7th day, so then it ruins everything. So Rabbi Yochanan says, what do you mean? It's already day 7. He began the day but without seeing anything. So therefore, he already was Yotzei 7 clean days. It's not going to become canceled based on his seeing something later in the day. That's just going to be considered a Re'ir Rishona, and he'll only have 2 Masariv and go to the mikveh, and that's the end of it. Loni Stor Eliyomo. The only day that gets messed up is that day. What do you mean that day gets messed up? If we say that the 7-day counting works from the beginning of the day, because Mixas Yom Kikula, we shouldn't even mess up that day of the count, at least as far as his Tuma Zav is concerned. Manavshach, Isasar, Kulu Sasar. If everything is going to be canceled, so all 7 days should be canceled. Lo Sasar, if it's not going to be canceled because it's considered as if he completed his 7-day count in the morning, Lo Nistav Lo Yomo. So even the last day shouldn't be canceled. So we say, you're right. That's what Rabbi Yochanan is really saying. Lo Nistor Below Yomo. It doesn't even cancel that 7th day. As far as his counting for Zav is concerned, he needed 7 clean days. He had 7 clean days because we say Mixas the Yom Kikulo. We're now in the top of Tez Zayin and Manala. V'amalei Rabbi Yossi.
For Zav, does he have to observe 7 clean days?
He does.
After one?
No, only after 2 riyos. He has to observe 7 clean days, and if he has 3 riyos, he needs 7 clean days plus a korban. If it's only 1 riyah,
After the third riyah.
after the 3rd riyah, he needs 7 clean days plus a korban. Right, if it's 3 times. V'amalei, and Rabbi Yoshia said to his sparring partner, he said to Rabbi Yochanan, you know what? Rabbi Yossi kai kavase. Your opinion is consistent with that of Rabbi Yossi. So because Rabbi Yoshia was of the opinion, this is the correct interpretation of Rabbi Yossi, that he also held Mixas Yom Kikulo. That when the Shomeres Yom, a Keneged Yom has a Riyah on the next day, if it's not at the very beginning of the day, she already, by virtue of being clean at the beginning of the day, is considered Tahora. And now, at the next day, now when she sees later in the day, that's considered to be the beginning of a new count. That's only Mikana La'abah. And if we're going to be Matame Mishkav Moshe Moshe, going to be Matame Mishkav Moshe, that's only Midrabanan. Rabbi Yossi the Mafreya who the Amar, but Rabbi Yossi said that the Mishkav Moshe was going to be Tameh. So he said, nah, mind the Mafreya Midrabanan. Rabbi Yossi clearly held that's only Midrabanan. Rabbi Yossi, wait a second. So then how does a woman ever become a Zava according to Rabbi Yossi? That's the obvious question. And the Gemara is prepared to ask an obvious question. Rabbi Yossi Mikdei Sava Mixas Yom Kikulo, since he holds Mixas Yom Kikulo, Zava Gemura, the Maisa Korban, how can a woman ever see 3 days in a row at the beginning of every single day when she's not spewing blood? And that's going to be a cancellation of her ziva. And then we say if she sees blood afterwards, it's the beginning of a new count. Mikana Labo of the Mikana Labo Mitame. So Zava Gemura and the Maisa Korban Echem Mishkakasla. Even the Chazia B'Palga Diyoma, Idach the Palga Diyoma, Salik La Shimor. If she's going to see blood in the middle of the day, so the beginning of the day, the first half of the day, is going to count as Shimur, is going to count as her clean counting, and therefore every single day is going to be a new count. We're never going to have 3 days in a row. So there are 2 possibilities, says the Gemara, of how it could be 3 days in a row. Either it can be 3 days in a row. He has 3 days in which she's bleeding nonstop. She's bleeding nonstop for 3 days. Who said she's going to stop bleeding? She's bleeding nonstop. Nonstop, Jack. Nonstop, she's bleeding. Or alternatively, she doesn't have to bleed nonstop, but if she's bleeding at the beginning of every single day, she'll never have a clean count at the beginning of the day. If every single day she bleeds during the entire Bein HaShmashos, from before the end of the day until the beginning of the next day, so then she's never going to have a beginning of the day in which she'll be able to say that she was clean, in which it will be Mixas Yom Kikulo. Shows that there's no time at the beginning of the day for her to start off as a clean day because she's seeing blood at the beginning of every single day. End of the pair. I don't know.